have so much time, so if I ask Bridget to kick off, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. There's a lot that can be said about Brexit and Ireland. I'll begin by saying that Brexit will damage Ireland, and Ireland will miss the UK in the EU. But over 90% of the Irish population are committed to remaining a member state of the EU, and that's not likely to change. And it would be good if the British press and British media stopped putting the 3 or 4 Irish Brexiteers on every programme in order to make them feel better. I'm going to talk about the Irish border because for me it is by far the most important issue in these negotiations. The Irish border today is a wondrous achievement. It is an achievement of 2 things, the Good Friday Agreement and the European Single Market. Both those things have ensured that a highly contested, conflictual border has been normalised. It has allowed a very significant proportion of the Northern Irish population who found themselves trapped in the wrong state to live with the existence of that state. This is a very precious thing. There has been conflict in Northern Ireland that has led to an awful lot of deaths. That is now at issue and in danger by Brexit. So that's the most important thing, that what has been achieved has been due to joint EU membership of the United Kingdom, and Brexit puts that in question. The Irish border is 500 kilometres long. It has 200 crossings, 13,000 commercial vehicles cross it every day. It is a seamless border. It is a border where individuals cross the border to shop, to go to hospital, to be treated, and Irish milk crosses that border sometimes 5 times a day. So there is now the prospect of an integrated Irish economy, and that is also put at risk by Brexit. So what have we from the United Kingdom on this? We have a series of papers. We have the UK paper on Northern Ireland and Ireland. We have its customs union paper. We have the Florence speech. And we have a lot of other statements that say that the United Kingdom is committed to frictionless trade between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and that there should be, in Prime Minister May's last speech, there should be no physical border infrastructure between Northern Ireland and Ireland. So how's that interpreted on that island? It's interpreted as prose, some would say poetry, and some would certainly say fantasy. Why? Because the United Kingdom has pledged to leave the single market, and it has pledged to leave the customs union. So we have a situation where the United Kingdom wants to maintain the status quo. Nothing is to change on the island of Ireland, nothing is to change at the Irish border, but it is actually removing itself from precisely those things that make that border work today. So for most people on the island of Ireland, the position of the United Kingdom is not credible. It's regarded as rhetorical posturing. It is regarded as ensuring that when the inevitable blame gets thrown about, as I've already seen from some of the hard Brexiteers in this jurisdiction, that somehow or other it's the EU's fault because they're going to insist on a border. So go beyond, forget all the rhetorical posturing and what's on paper. So what does the Irish government know? Well, it asked 3 years ago its customs services, the Irish Revenue Commissioners, to do a detailed forensic analysis of the Irish border and what it means. And the conclusion of the Irish Revenue Commissioners is that an open customs border is impossible after Brexit. These are the people who know most about it, who say that there will be an 800% increase in the volume of customs declarations. They identify things like temporary storage, import and export zones, e-manifest, ENS in terms of safety, etc., etc. They have done forensic analysis of what it means if the United Kingdom leaves the customs union. So what do we get in response to that? The United Kingdom says we want a customs partnership and we want streamlined customs arrangements. But that doesn't mean no customs arrangements. It means streamlined customs relations. It doesn't mean no. So the question then is, where is this going to happen? We had Legatum thought that maybe we could have little drones popping up and down the Irish border. So what can the United Kingdom do if it's serious about leaving the customs union and the single market. It can do a number of things, and it has an enormous political and moral responsibility to the island of Ireland, north and south. What can it do? Firstly, it can say it is not and will not attempt to use the Irish border as any leverage or entry into the rest of its relationship with the EU post-Brexit. It can state that it recognises that Northern Ireland is different. Secondly, it can state that it would be willing to move from its red lines in order to prevent a hard border on the island of Ireland, or at least for Northern Ireland. And that will come down to something called what to do about regulation. So I remind everyone that Prime Minister May in Florence not long ago said, when we differ from the EU in our regulatory choices, it will be because we want rules that are right for Britain's particular situation. Apply that to the situation on the Irish border. Is Ireland not to be concerned about the health and safety of what comes over that border? Everyone knows that border for long was a zone of smuggling. Everyone knows that there's cleaning of agricultural diesel on the northern side of the border today, and Northern Ireland does not manage to deal with it. So we know what can happen on the Irish border. And I will end by saying, and this is perhaps the most significant thing I would say today, and that is, Prime Minister May last night said that she needed a deal that she could defend to her people. An Irish Prime Minister is going to have to bring back a deal to an Irish Parliament that they can defend. Will an Irish Parliament be asked to endorse something that might actually damage peace on the island of Ireland? Will an Irish Parliament agree to fundamentally the reintroduction of, however managed, a border on the island of Ireland? Prime Minister May is not the only one with an electorate, and this is existential for Ireland. And I would end by saying that what is perhaps most shocking for people on the island of Ireland is how little concern and how little interest has been displayed during the referendum and afterwards on the Irish question in this jurisdiction.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you. As we don't have so much time, I'd like to focus on three main points. The first one would be going to mention the three of them, and then I'm going to try to elaborate a little bit on the three. The first one would be that no, Gibraltar is not the main point in the main issue in our relation with the UK. The second one would be that Brexit was a surprise and was really undesired by both elite and public opinion in Spain. And the third one would be that Spain is one of the most affected countries in the UK, and that it has, of course, some implications as regards the negotiations themselves. So regarding the first question on Gibraltar, actually not on Gibraltar, I would say that there are many more important factors in the relation between the UK and Spain, and by that I mean, of course, in economic terms, and I'm going to mention a few figures, but also in interpersonal relations. As you may know, millions of Britons go to Spain every single year on vacation. Last year only, 18 million Britons came to Spain, which is actually, a record figure for us. Same thing about also the people that live in Spain. More than 300,000 Britons live in Spain, and in the other sense, as Spaniards living in the UK, we have now more than 150,000 Spaniards, due mainly to the economic crisis and youngsters that have come here, right? But also, I wanted to raise some of the economic figures, some of the important economic figures that are not widely known normally by general public opinion. For instance, as regards bilateral trade, only in 2016 we had more than 30 billion euros between both countries. And then as regards investment, for instance, the UK is the country in the world where Spain invests the most. almost 19% of its investment goes directly to the UK, and the UK is also the second country in the world that invests the most in Spain. So more or less 13% of the investment comes from the UK. So no, Gibraltar, as I said before, is not the main point in our relation. Second element I wanted to raise, yes, Brexit was undesired, yes, Brexit was a surprise, and yes, Brexit, Spanish population and Spanish elites were unhappy with the result of it. People in Spain and also elites do not really get why the UK has decided to leave the European Union, and this is very interesting to think about in Spanish terms, because as it was already mentioned before, for the UK, the relation with the European Union has been much more or less a transactional relation, right? But for Spain, it hasn't been the case, and it is not the case now, even after the economic crisis. It's more of a relation that has meant for Spain the democratization, the rule of law in the country, normalization as a European state, also more influence in foreign policy, and even social progress for the country. So basically, having that in mind is very difficult to understand from that perspective that a single member state wants to leave the project because of our perspective in Spain. From someone who doesn't really know about the perspective, this transactional perspective I was mentioning earlier from the UK. And the third element I wanted to raise was that about Spain being one of the most affected countries. It is normally known that, of course, the case of Ireland, but also Germany and the Netherlands and Cyprus and even Denmark are amongst, for different reasons, the countries most affected by Brexit. But the case of Spain, for the reasons already mentioned by me earlier, regarding people and also regarding the economic very strong ties between both states, then it's going to be, Spain is going to be very, very affected. And this has implications in the sense that, of course, Spain would like to have the most similar relation as possible, comparing to the one we have nowadays. But that doesn't mean, and this is something that has to be very well understood, that the divide and rule game could eventually have any impact on Spain's position, because it's the EU's project is vital for its even national project itself. So Spain is going to lie behind the Commissioner's the Commission's negotiator, and at the same time, and this is also very interesting, public opinion in Spain, even if it regrets the fact that the UK is leaving, even if it knows how important also tourism and also these vast communities that live in Spain are for the country and for the economic, do not want to give a blank check to the negotiators, not even to the Spaniards with the Commission and so on, but even to the Commission, so that the UK has something better than what it has now that it's part of the European Union. And this is very, very interesting. And I'd like to end up with it, because I think I don't have any more time, on the implication that this has also to the negotiations themselves, the ones that we are having now. Because I said that we would like to have, the most similar status in the future, but as regards the negotiations that we are living now, which are basically on the Irish border, and also on the question of money, and also on the other element, citizens approach, all of them are very important for Spain, but but the most salient issue, of course, is the one that has to do with citizens. So Spain is really going to try to lobby hard inside the Commission so that a good agreement that takes into account both the interests of UK citizens in Spain, but also, of course, Spanish and European citizens in the UK is reached. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Calliope.
Thank you. In Greece, the UK was known as the reluctant partner. However, there has been, the result of the referendum has been qualified as a thunderbolt. So there was surprise, and rather an unpleasant surprise. The issue got entangled into the domestic discussion for some time because of the recent, at that time, Greek referendum, just 1 year earlier, regarding the third adjustment program and the risk of exiting euro. So the Grexit and Brexit were issues that in some way were seen in some parallel. So it was unavoidable. Unavoidable was also the lack of preparation for the day after. Like in Greece, the referendum did not prepare for the success of the government that promoted it. People saw the British referendum in a similar way, that, okay, and now what? The next point is that Greece is not for a punitive or vengeful approach to the negotiations. Generally, the UK and its citizens should not be estranged from the EU. So it is supporting as much as possible a soft version of Brexit, whatever that means, because it's still rather unclear. The Commission guidelines are respected, so the negotiations are seen as taking place at the EU level. And there is no open discussion, no public statement on behalf of the government on the issues, on the negotiations or anything. So the government tends to keep a low profile. It is cautious. It has an eye on the day after and what will happen in terms of bilateral relations. So everything seems, for the moment, rather quiet. Of course, certain things happen below the surface of quietness and silence, because there are the issue of Brexit and what happens in bilateral relations are part of the discussions in the contacts or visits between ministers from both countries. So the issue, we can see that it is discussed, we don't know the details, but in general, there is a very cautious approach. So we can imagine that there is more than we can see at this moment. Generally, the wish is to continue as much as possible, or to have longer transitional periods. And beyond the economic, the issues that are now in the negotiation, budget, etc., there is also concern regarding defense and security issues that from time to time appear also in the press as matters of discussion. Now, the issues are, are maybe not as important as in Spain, but still the UK is the fourth most important trading partner for Greece, which is important also in terms of the, at this stage of fragile Greek economy. There are also about 70,000 Greeks living and working or studying in the UK, so that is also a matter of concern. Tourism also is a matter of concern. If this flow of about 2 to 3 million British tourists per year will be possible to continue. And of course, all the companies that have are established in London and generally in the UK, among which shipping, the shipping industry. So there are many issues. There is also the question of the EU budget, of course, which has a special interest because of the cohesion policies that might affect the resources that can come into the country. So all of these are concerns, but there are no specific answers right now. Now, the biggest, let's say, mobilization, which is not enormous, it's still rather discrete, but it exists, takes place within the business community. They are concerned, there is uncertainty. Maybe there is also some optimism that, as they say, the British realism will prevail from both sides, so that there will be a soft version of Brexit, but still they don't know what that is. They mobilize usually through Brussels, through their collective European representation. They have sent positions to the Greek ministries, but the ministries have not reached out to the business community. So it's still quite vague what is happening there. I say that they are, optimistic in the sense that they believe we will go towards a soft Brexit. Maybe this is wishful thinking. I don't know. I need to stress also the role of the embassy, the British embassy, as well as of the British Hellenic Chamber of Commerce, which within 6 months has 2 events on the issue. That's quite something in a context where there is, for the rest, there is rather little. So for the business community, it is very important to continue with free movement of goods, labor, and capital, as we may understand. So to conclude, cautious government of the public agenda. The issue is not debated in society. Citizens are not aware unless those who have relatives or people they know that who are living in the UK. The media report issues around Brexit as a fact without even referring to Greek positions. Greek positions are very, rather marginal in these press articles. And of course, there is an eye to the opportunities opened by Brexit regarding, for example, the relocation of certain European agencies, such as the Medicines Agency.
Thank you. And Simon.
Okay, we've already talked quite a lot about the UK, and in the chapters that Hussein and I have co-authored in the publication, you can read a lot more. All I want to add at this stage is just a more high-level observation, which is that one of the difficulties that the UK faces in all of this is that it lacks a strategic vision of what its relationship might be with the European Union and with Europe as a whole. And we see that with the referendum, where you have 2 sides who not unreasonably advance a whole range of arguments to win the vote, but not to have a debate about what the UK's role in the world might be. And with the result of that referendum, we end up with a set of narratives, a set of ideas that are out there, but which are not really purposed for being turned into a set of plans for the process of leaving the European Union, let alone for the Article 50 process. So the UK, I think, the difficulties, the issues that we have seen in the past year and a half, the surprise and the shock that colleagues have talked about, again, I think are a reflection of that uncertainty and the mixed messages that come from different parts of the UK system, that at each stage that the UK has been asked to pronounce on what it wants, it has given what we might term a big shrug of, not a shrug of the shoulders in indifference, but I'm not sure shrug. And we saw that most recently with the general election, which produced a very divided result in Parliament and removed the one actor who seemed to have a mandate and a position of power and left her in post to struggle on. And notwithstanding the conclusions that have come out during today, the position of Theresa May politically with her party is highly problematic and raises a whole set of knock-on questions for European partners, but also for British negotiators in the short run and as long as she is in post. So really it's to stress that the UK, obviously in this negotiation, is in a fundamentally different position. It has chosen a change option. It is committed to a change option, having started Article 50, and it will leave in March 2019 whether or not there's a deal, unless there's an extension or some revocation, which we've already discussed. So it's dealing with a substantially different set of incentives and requirements to any other party in this process, but without a clear steer about where this might be heading. And I'll stop there.